Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ari Stamatakos, and today we're back with another episode of Player Spotlight. Now, for those who haven't seen this series before, basically this is where we go through some players who are on the periphery of the Socceroos squad and take a look at where their hopes lie heading into the World Cup in November. Now, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail of this video, it's on Cristian Volpato, so let's get into it. So as we always start episodes of this series, let's take a look at who is Cristian Volpato. Well, he's an 18-year-old attacking midfielder slash striker, currently playing for AS Roma in Serie A. He played his youth football for three clubs in Sydney: Western Sydney Wanderers, Sydney FC and Sydney United. However, he got cut from all three of those teams before making his move to Italy to play for Roma in 2020, where he has then made, I think, 4 appearances for the senior squad across these 2 years. He represented Italy in under 19 level and under 20 level. He's represented Italy at under 19 level 4 times and at under 20 level 3 times. He does have the choice to play either between Australia and Italy, obviously having ancestry from Italy but being born in Australia. He does have that choice, and there has been some rumours about him potentially being called up a couple of international breaks ago for Australia that didn't eventuate. And of course, with Italy's injury struggles at times throughout the recent periods, he could be called up for Italy as well. But I think what we're going to look at for Volpato in this episode, we're not really going to be going through the traditional structure of these series so far. We're just going to have a chat about Volpato, what he could offer for the Socceroos, whether or not the Socceroos should actually cap him, and what are some positives and some negatives that could come with Volpato being in the Socceroos squad, and whether or not it's a risk that Australia should be taking. So like I said at the top of the show, we're not going to be following the traditional format of this series so far. We're not going to be looking at his player profile in depth. We're going to be looking at his Socceroos career to date or where his future lies. We're just going to have a chat about Cristian Volpato, just generally, from a general perspective. And I think you kind of need to speak about Volpato in a couple of parts, because when you look at his youth football in a sense in his youth career, he was playing in Australia. Like I said, he was playing at Western Sydney, Sydney United, and Sydney FC. Now, why I think the main question and the main conjecture and the questions that have come out from Volpato, especially now that he's broken onto the scene in Italy, is how and why was he cut from those teams? Now, obviously, we have seen the talent that he possesses. The reason why I'm actually filming this episode for this series is because he did come off the bench for Roma over the weekend and scored and got an assist to help them come from behind, come from a 1-0 deficit to win 3-1. He did get 2 goal contributions in that game and really exploded on the Italian football scene because of that game. Now, I think the anger that some Australian football fans is, how can he be cut from these A-League and these state league clubs when he can go to Italy, play for one of the best sides in the Italian First Division, and score and get an assist? Now, when you look at this, there's a couple of reasons for this. Now, I think we can speak about it at length for ages about the standard of Australian scouting and the identifying talent and whatever. But this is probably not the time and place. Now, what Australian football is in comparison to maybe some of the top leagues in Europe is that it is very physical. When you look at a lot of players that have come from these European leagues and come to the A-League, they say that it's an extremely physical league, and that is potentially one of the reasons why he was cut from these clubs, from Western Sydney and Sydney FC, is that because physically perhaps wasn't up to it. He's still only 18 years of age at the time of recording, and he would have been cut from those teams when he was 15, even 14 years old. So potentially he wasn't as physically developed as what he potentially should have been at that stage. But when you take a look at that, you also look at it from a perspective of, well, I don't think that shouldn't really matter if he has the footballing ability, and we've already seen that his footballing ability is up to scratch. I mean, he's doing it for AS Roma. I'm pretty sure he can do it for Western Sydney, right? So you have that perspective, and then you also have the perspective of attitude, right? So I think that they're probably the only two things that you can kind of say when it comes to Volpato, because the football talent is obviously there, the natural talent is obviously there, and it's either from a physicality perspective or from a attitude perspective. Now, we all know that he has made some blunders or some missteps so far from a personality, from a kind of ego perspective, I think you can call it that. He has made some missteps and has perhaps not acted in a correct way, if you were to call it that. But still, being 18, 17 years of age when those missteps occurred, I think it is a little bit harsh to kind of dismiss him straight away just because of those mistakes. Now, when you look at what Volpato is in terms from a Socceroos perspective, he is something that Australia haven't had for a long time, and that is true X factor, right? Obviously, you look at the current international setup, you look at Martin Boyle, Alan Mabil, Marco Tilio, Daniel Arzani, Arzani, Craig Goodwin, Matt Leckie. You have these players who maybe Tilio and Arzani to a little bit of a lesser extent, but those other four players are pretty similar players in terms of they're very systematic players. They are role players who do their job and don't really offer anything. They're not risk takers. I think Volpato, we've seen right now, I mean, he left Australia to go to Italy. He is a risk taker, right? He could have just accepted his fate and gone journeyman travelling across clubs in Australia, but no, he took the risk. He went to Italy and kind of put his whole life on hold to pursue a career in football, and it's paid off for him so far. I think that innate risk-taking ability and that innate ability to want to take the game on and take life on, in a sense, is something that Australia need and something that the Socceroos need. Now, when we look at him from a positional perspective, from a tactical perspective, he has played as a central attacking midfielder for Roma, as well as playing almost like a number 9, and he does like to drift out wide. He's a little bit of an auxiliary forward, can play in a multitude of positions, can play in a multitude of roles, and while Australia don't really play with a true number 10, and while he probably is down the line in terms of strikers, it will be, when he eventually does, if he eventually does, I should say, make a Socceroos appearance, it's going to be interesting to see where he fits. And I think that goes back to the question or the thing that I was going to say, when or if he gets capped. Now, should the Socceroos cap Cristian Volpato? Now, there has been some conjecture around him getting capped. Of course, there was rumours that he was going to get capped for the games against Vietnam and Oman. I do believe that was the international break in which he was going to get capped. And even still, the games after that, which was against Japan and Saudi Arabia, there was still some talk about him getting capped for those games. He of course didn't. He has chosen to represent Italy at under 20 and under 19 level, which I've just said. Those, however, don't mean that he can't represent the Socceroos. I think if you look at Frank Karacic, for example, he's represented Croatia at youth level, but of course he's now a fully fledged Socceroos. So he has represented Italy at the youth level in the European Championships. He did score a couple of goals in the European Championships at youth level, like I said, under 20s and under 19s level. But what Australia need to do is they do need to be really careful with Volpato, because he has already been, I would hesitate to say ostracised, but he has been criticised to a pretty heavy extent as an Australian and as an Australian football player, right? So he obviously does feel a connection to Italy. Of course, he obviously has ancestry there, so the choice to represent Italy in comparison to Australia will obviously be a tough one for him to choose. But the Socceroos need to be very careful, and Graham Arnold needs to be very careful when approaching Cristian Volpato, because I can't make promises to him too early. He can't make a promise that he'll start games at the World Cup or he'll start games at the Asian Cup, because, to be honest, he probably isn't ready to start those games against fully fledged internationals. However, I think it would be a massive misstep if the Socceroos didn't at least approach him to be capped by the Socceroos and to be an Australian footballer, because he obviously has bucket loads of potential. He obviously has extreme amounts of talent, and talent that Australian football hasn't really seen for a long time. So having him go to Italy and having him represent the Italian national squad at senior level and missing out on a player of that caliber could be a very, very harsh lesson that the Socceroos will learn, and Australia will probably learn if that is to happen. In my opinion, in my personal opinion, I do think the Socceroos will be, it's in their best interest to cap Cristian Volpato, not because I think he will be the saviour for Australian football, or not because I think he will be the player to transform this team, not by any means, but certainly I should say he can be a player to facilitate that growth and that development for the squad. But I think having a player of that ability, of that potential ability in the squad, can give a lot of motivation and hope to other players in the squad to try and get better and to try and improve, as well as the fact that if he does become a player that is playing for Roma consistently in the next couple of years, if he were to play for Italy, an Italy squad which is stacked with talent, I feel like it's a player that we will be missing out on, because granted, when you look at the likes of Marco Tilio, Daniel Arzani, Guan Kuo, Irakunda from Adelaide United, we do have a lot of young, bright attacking prospects, but having someone like Volpato with that slight X factor about him and that slight cockiness and that confidence, which while has potentially caused him some trouble off the pitch, that arrogance and that confidence on the pitch could potentially set him apart from some of the other players in the Socceroos squad. So while obviously he probably won't go to Qatar, I can almost guarantee it by saying he won't go to Qatar, he obviously Italy aren't going to Qatar, so there's no threat of that being a possibility from their perspective. But the Socceroos should be looking to cap Cristian Volpato sooner rather than later, because when we look at what he offers, we've spoken about what he offers tactically. We obviously have the likes of Tom Rogic, who is slightly fading out of the Socceroos squad with age and with his form slowly dipping. Volpato can kind of come in and be that natural replacement for Tom Rogic. He will be competing with the likes of Jake Bruma and the players I've just mentioned with Mark Attilio, Daniel Arzani, these likes, right? He obviously has an edge immediately. The fact that he's playing in Europe, the fact that he's playing with some of the best players in the world, the fact that he's playing under Jose Mourinho, who is one of the best managers of the 21st century, if not the best, right? So the fact that he has all this experience at only 18 years of age, and with this experience, what it comes with maturity. Players who are playing in this system and players who make a name for themselves in Europe grow as people a lot quicker than those who make their name in Australia, just purely off the fact that the pressure that comes when you play for the likes of Roma or these big clubs in Italy, Spain, Portugal, England, France, Germany. The pressure that comes with playing for these storied clubs is something that players in Australia cannot even comprehend, how much pressure is on those players. So if Volpato is thrusted into the deep end playing for Roma, he'll be able to mature as a person, mature as a footballer, and then he should be able to slot into that Socceroos squad very well. And he should be able to offer something very, very good, potentially for the next Asian Cup or potentially in 4 years' time. He'll be 22 years of age by the time 2026 rolls around. He will have hopefully 4 more years playing in that AS Roma system, playing for a very, very elite club in Italy. And hopefully by then, all this drama that has potentially come because of his antics off the pitch at times, hopefully all that drama should have subsided. And hopefully we should be seeing him in a Socceroos shirt, because the talent that he possesses far outweighs the slight missteps that he has the slight missteps that he has potentially made off the pitch. In my opinion, he should be capped sooner rather than later. Should that be in Qatar? Absolutely not. Should that be after Qatar? In my opinion, yes. It's just I dread to think of the day where we see Cristian Volpato running around for Italy and we sit back and think what could have been, because he has the potential to be one of the better players in Europe. We've already seen that. You don't come off the bench, score a goal and get an assist in 5 minutes to win AS Roma a game in Serie A if you don't have talent, right? So obviously there's going to be a bucketload of pressure, but with that pressure comes the potential, and pressure makes diamonds. So that arrogance that he's got and that confidence and that cockiness that he's got in his own ability, hopefully he can use that energy and use it for good rather than bad. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we can see him in a Socceroos shirt in the years to come, because he's probably one of the most exciting prospects to come out of Australia. And like I said, that experience that he's already got in Europe, that experience that he's got playing under Jose Mourinho will be invaluable come 4, 5, 6 years time where he hopefully will be one of the best players for the Socceroos. But yeah, that is I know it's a slightly different episode of Player Spotlight for Cristian Volpato, but I thought it would be a little bit disingenuous to speak about him like we've spoken about every other player, because he's quite unique. He's quite a unique person, quite a unique player, and his situation is a lot different to others that we have covered on this series. But yes, that is all. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Player Spotlight. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Leave your thoughts about who we should be doing a Player Spotlight on next. Make sure you subscribe to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel, like the video. See you guys next time, and goodbye.